Welcome to 20 Minutes to Better Schools with EduPuzzle Partners. We are your co-host. My name is Allison Augustin,
And I'm Matt Harriger.
and together we are EduPuzzle Partners. I am currently an MTSS coordinator in the district that I work for. I have a lot of experience as an educator, working 15 plus years as a special education teacher, um, pretty much working with grades kindergarten through eighth grade. I also have experience as an educational diagnostician where I learned how to analyze data, both sets of data, student outcome data, implementation data to help support schools and help to support students. And then from my work there, I became an MTSS coach where I got a lot of coaching experience as well before becoming a coordinator.
And I was a teacher, a regular ed teacher for over 10 years. I taught mostly fourth grade and sixth grade before I moved into becoming an assistant principal at an elementary school. So I have almost 5 years of experience as a school administrator before I moved into the current role that I'm in, which is also the MTSS coordinator in the school district in which we work, where I work with all of the middle schools and high schools, and Allison works with all of the elementary schools.
And we decided that we wanted to design a podcast that could help school leaders make a difference in their school, given the work that we do every day. And what we would like to do is we would like to structure these episodes to dive really deeply into the MTSS or the multi-tiered system of supports framework by following a format where we pose and then answer some frequently asked questions that we hear both through our EduPuzzle Partners business, but also through our work in our schools. And today we're just going to kind of start by jumping into kind of the outline of how we want this podcast to go. But just keeping in mind that this is all about helping you set up systems for student success and school improvement.
So the question for today is, why is MTSS so hard for people to understand?
Mm.
It's a hard one.
It is a hard one. It's a very hard one. And I think this is kind of the kind of why we're doing what we're doing here. It feels like not just in our work in our particular district, but the work in our state and the work across other states that we're hearing from folks is that no matter how much we put out there about MTSS and the multi-tier systems of supports, there's still always so much misconception and misunderstanding. Um, and from my lens, just doing this for gosh, 5 plus years now, 6 plus years now, is that it's just that it's so abstract and comprehensive, and there's so many components to it that make it very difficult for people to actually take it and then figure out how to implement. I think sometimes we want to take the idea of MTSS and boil it down to some simple thing that we can easily do or implement, and that's just not ever going to happen because it is a framework that's designed to continuously work on school improvement, not just a thing that we do. Um,
You mean it's not a process?
it's not a process, Matt. It's not a process. And a lot of people call it a process. They think it's a process. They think there's a start and a finish, and it's not that. And I think because of that, it gets very difficult to focus in on what it is we need to focus on or what it is that we need to really work on. Because it's so abstract, um, we have to figure out how to take it and almost chop it up into bite-sized pieces and figure out how to um, kind of get that information out in a way where it starts to make sense and it starts to come together and become manageable for people. I think it's safe to say, and I think Matt would agree with me, we've been doing this work together for
5
three
years?
years. 5 years? Oh my gosh. 5 years. I can't even keep a track of time. A very long time. And while we've come a long way, we still see so much misconception. So it's not something that's just gonna resonate with people and you're gonna be able to implement. And so trying to figure out, and I think it's safe to say that we are both problem solvers and we're both constantly trying to figure out how to do things differently. And again, because of that, we want to be able to create a podcast where we can have these bite-sized pieces. And in every episode, really just sort of take hopefully no more than 20 minutes just to dive into a piece, one of those little pieces that we need to address, or one of those little components that we need to address to help with implementation of MTSS.
Well, and I think too, from secondary perspective, and maybe it's because in our district, in our state, we started with RTI in elementary. Our high schools and our middle school folks don't see MTSS as, or are just recently maybe starting to see MTSS as something that they have to do, quotey fingers. Um, but and really, I get questions all the time about high school MTSS and what resources are there for high school and all these things. And in reality, the framework of MTSS really applies to high schools just like it does to elementary and to middle. And so we have to do the same type of problem solving. Surely it looks different, but it looks different from every school, no matter, from school to school. And so really just thinking about across all the grade spans, how we can take this framework and help schools with implementing it. And we wanted to make this sort of like bite-size episodes because well, Allison has a shorter commute to work than I do, but if I wanted to listen to something on my way to or from the office, I've got 20 minutes or so in the car. I could listen to a podcast, and I feel like that's something that kind of resonates with people. So I feel like the shorter or the quick bite-sized types of things are more readily accessible rather than sitting through an hour and a half meeting or something that feels like a meeting when you're listening to it. So you want to go ahead and talk about kind of how we're going to make it through all the different components?
Sure, absolutely. So again, trying to make these bite-sized pieces, we've gathered questions that we know are common questions people have and tried to think about how to align those in a way where we're hitting on the different components of MTSS, which is what we're going to do. So starting on our next trip, I'll say, because really what we're envisioning is we're going to take a road trip through the components of MTSS. So starting with our next session or our next podcast, we're going to really hit the component of leadership, and that's going to be several sessions going through the idea of leadership in buildings and how really it's those people in that leadership capacity or role that establish the systems that are part of your MTSS. And then we're going to take a look at some infrastructure and answer some questions around infrastructure, making sure your school is ready to implement MTSS. We'll dive into some other components like communication, which of course is important for basically anything you do. Any initiative needs solid communication. So kind of how that works with MTSS. And then we'll get into some things that I think a lot of us more likely associate with MTSS, like the multi-tiered model. That's really just one component, and problem solving and how we use database problem solving. And then, of course, data evaluation. So there's a lot of components in our, when we look at it, we see those six components that I just referenced, and we're going to try to organize the road trip so that we will kind of spend some time over multiple podcasts with each component, kind of diving into what that looks like, questions that we hear around those components, questions to consider when thinking about where are you with your implementation journey with MTSS to hopefully help you, hopefully help you with that journey.
All right, so I think that's all for this time. But like Allison referenced, this is kind of our first episode, but a sort of our introduction episode. In our next podcast episode, which will be in a few weeks, we're going to jump into that leadership component and talk about the purpose and the role of a leadership team, an MTSS leadership team at your school, and how to best set that up and what that should look like.
All right, great. Thanks for joining us.
We'll see you next time.